Hey everyone, Mitch coming in with the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So, day 3 of Outlaws of Thunder Junction spoiler season is here. And while I was sleeping, and some of you were sleeping, and some of you, it's just a normal part of your day because you live in a different part of the world, some exciting cards came out. Let's jump into them. So first up, we've got Vadmir, New Blood, and now I've got Bad Blood by Taylor Swift stuck in my head. Okay, anyways, moving on. 2/2 Vampire Rogue for 1 and a black. Whenever you commit a crime, put a +1 counter on Vadmir, New Blood. Triggers only once each turn. Wizards. I mean, I guess this one probably could be pretty easily used and abused and probably comboed with, but you know, that's just kind of what happens sometimes, right? Anyways, as long as it's got 4 or more counters on it, it has Menace and Lifelink. And sorry, shorthand, +1 counter sometimes because I talk fast sometimes, and sometimes I slip on those words. Anyways, so basically, this is a commander that, well, can obviously get quite large quite quickly, even if it is just 1 time each turn. With each trip around the table, again, it can happen on your opponent's turns as well, so as long as you're committing crimes there, it can keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Again, like 4 times, essentially, with each trip around the table, which obviously can get it to that Menace and Lifelink pretty quickly as well. So, repeatable targeting effects for your opponents, anything they control, or cards in their graveyards. Again, that is a crime. Repeatable effects can be amazing with this, obviously, because when you are doing that, well, all of a sudden, this can become quite massive in no time at all. It is a very interesting commander because, I mean, like, all you're doing is just getting this larger and larger and larger, and then, giving it essentially Menace and Lifelink, so you can pad your life total, which is nice. You can also, like, work with, certain kind of, like, life-gaining effects, like, Veto can work really well with this, obviously, because you're like, oh, I gain life, I drain you too. But also, yeah, I mean, Menace, being able to get it through in combat is nice. It's kind of like a build your own Voltron in a way. I mean, obviously, it's kind of like Voltron slash, committing crimes, targeting things, so there is that interesting aspect to it. Obviously, if you're in a vampire deck that has good amount of targeting effects too, or a rogue deck that has a good amount of targeting effects too, that can be good in the 99. It's an interesting card for sure. Moving on. Binding Negotiation, a sorcery for 1 and a black. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, discard it. Otherwise, you may put a face-down exile card they own into their graveyard. Or face up, I should say. Interesting. So basically, like, you can stop them from plotting something. I think, no, is plotting face down? I think plotting's face down. Anyways, interesting overall. Probably going to see much play in Commander. Next up, Desperate Bloodseeker, a 2/2 lifelinking vampire that has a hat flying behind it for some reason. Cool. For 1 and a black. When it enters the battlefield, target player mills 2 cards. I mean, maybe in a self-mill deck or in a mill deck, this could be useful. Other than that, yeah, 2/2 lifelinker, not all that impactful. Next up, Hellspur Brute, a 5/4 Minotaur Mercenary for 5 mana. Affinity for Outlaws, interesting. It's the first time I believe we've seen Affinity for Outlaws. Again, 1 less cast for each Assassin, Mercenary, Pirate, Rogue, and or Warlock you control. Trample, if you've got an Outlaw deck, maybe consider this one. If not, probably don't consider this one. Next up, 3 Steps Ahead. Instant for a single blue mana with a plus sign next to it, so you know what that means. Spree time! Choose 1 or more additional cost, plus an extra 1 in a blue counter target spell. So essentially, oh my gosh, how am I just missing on like just the standard awfully costed counter spell? What is it? Goodness gracious, 1 blue. Cancel? Is that it? Cancel, I think. Yeah, stop playing Cancel. Stop playing Cancel. Unless you have a deck that has like a commander like Baral that like is all about counter spells and you want every single one you can and it just reduces cost anyway. There's other ones. And I know some players out there say like, well, it's budget friendly. There are more budget friendly counter spells than even Cancel that are better than Cancel. Stop using Cancel. Anyways, +3, create tokens, copy of target artifact or creature control. +2, draw 2 cards, discard a card. I mean, in total, you can cast this for what? 1 + 2 is 3, +3 is 6, +2 is 8 mana. In total, that's a lot of mana. Again, instant speed, though. Making a copy, again, of a creature or artifact only you control, so there is that limitation, is nice still, though. Drawing 2, discarding a card is nice as well. And yeah, countering a spell is more... The countering a spell part is the more part where this is, like, you can include it in the deck, like, as a counter spell, but has that, like, backup for the other parts. Obviously, you need to wait to be able to counter a spell that you actually want to counter, but, I mean, more often than not, you're probably going to utilize this, again, for most likely that card draw and discard, or, I mean, again, saving for a counter spell, or, yeah, if you have a deck that revolves around making creature tokens, that's really nice. Artifacts or creatures, I should say. It's a very interesting, very flexible card. Each of these things is overcosted, but that kind of makes sense essentially as to its flexibility and why. But yeah, it's a very interesting card. I think it could fit a counterspell slot of a deck that is looking for that flexibility on what it can do. Again, it can either be draw, draw. It is, card advantage and selection as well at that discard. Or yeah, those tokens are interesting too. It's interesting. I like that card. Next up, Loan Shark. Okay, I love the art on this one. That is just some really cool art. Very cool. A 3/4 Shark Rogue, and the name is just amazing. For 3 and a blue, enters the battlefield if you cast 2 or more spells this turn, draw a card. Plot for 3 and a blue. So obviously, by plotting this and casting on a future turn for free at sorcery speed, you can, kind of like save up this 4 mana basically for something else on a future turn so that you can then utilize it to cast other spells and then be able to draw a card. Again, enters battlefield if you cast 2 more spells this turn. So I guess you technically, right, you'd only have to cast 1 other spell in that turn and then cast this from plotted or whatever you would call that, right? So being able to cast that, you would draw the card. Yeah, it's interesting. Is it for every deck out there? Absolutely not. Is it for rogue decks? Maybe. So there you go. Or shark tribal decks. There you go. Next up, Malcolm the Eyes. Now, I believe this is like an arena version of the card, but we also saw a leak version of this card. So I believe that this is not just arena specific and this is an actual card. It just was spoiled in arena format for some reason. Anyways, 2/2 Siren Pirate for 2 mana. And is it flying haste? Whenever you catch your second spell, you turn investigate. Interesting. It's kind of like I've actually seen another, like, From, isn't it? The uncommon commander at 4 mana that basically has this, but, like, instead of investigating, it's draw. And then also getting counters on it, too. And it's got flying as well, not haste, though. We also seen Jorian back in the day. Not too long ago, I guess, but still back in the day at this point. Where it's second spell turn, draw a card. So this is obviously worse than those other ones because, like, you still have to pay to sacrifice those clues to draw those cards, and that can get quite expensive throughout the game. But it does give you the flexibility where it's like, you can actually utilize those clues for other things, too. Like, if you had, like, Galzeth Prismari in play, you could utilize those to tap to be able to cast instant sorceries. You also could utilize those artifacts for things like Blinkmoth Urn to, like, keep them in play to, like, gain more mana. Or things like Tamio's Journal to sacrifice them to tutor up things. So, obviously, you can do, like, a Clue Tribal kind of deck with this. But you're not getting, like, the inherent card advantage of the other ones as quickly. You're still getting it like a saved card advantage, but it's interesting because, yeah, Shimmer Dragon can work with it too. So there's ways to benefit from the clues more so than just benefiting from card draw. But yes, it is a very interesting card. And then I can't remember that brand new one that works with clues from the most recent set as well, where like it reduces the cost to sacrifice them by 1. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, it's a very interesting commander. I do think it is a nice build around that is different than just like, hey, cast spells, get card advantage. It's like cast spells, get some investigation, you can get some investigation, get some clues, and then, yeah, utilizing other investigate things can be very interesting with this, too. And with a 2/2 Flying Haste, if you really want to go, I guess, weird Voltron with this, you could. Obviously, things that, like, give this power based on the artifacts you control could be quite nice with this, too. Next up, Nomadic Opossum. Interesting. Quick little fact, and actually, not rules learners out there, but grammar people out there, there you go, help me out. But I believe, technically, at least in the English language, you can say, or you can spell it opossum or just possum, which is interesting and weird, because not too many animals actually have that, like, distinction where it's like, either one is correct. Apparently, Magic, it is opossum. I don't believe that we've seen a possum yet. Anyways, a 3/3 opossum mount for 2 and a green. Okay. One more quick aside, and I know it's a lot for aside for, just like this kind of a card, but like, oh, okay. Again, we used to have pigs, right? And I brought this one before. We used to have like Zodiac Pig. It was a pig. But then like, wait, no, they all have to be boars. Blah, 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 blah. Why do we have like all these different miscellaneous things that you could just call beasts, which you used to call beasts, but you can't have the distinction of a pig and a boar? Wizards, come on, give me pigs. Anyways, 3/3 Opossum Mount. When it attacks, while saddled, it gets +1/+2 until end of turn. You may return any number of creatures that saddled to his hand. Saddle 1. This one is actually quite interesting because there's only so many ways in mono green actually to bounce creatures back to your hand. There are certain ways, but like there are only so many ways. And when you have a commander like, what is it, Galta, the new Galta, where you might really want to use and abuse an ETB, but you don't have obviously many blink effects outside of like a Conjurer's Closet or Voyager Staff essentially in this color. But when it comes to bouncing creatures back to your hand like a Team or Sabertooth type effect, there's only so many ways to do it. And this is a repeatable one. Yes, not every single, like, you can't just like keep doing it on the same turn, but like every single turn, if this is attacking, and this can survive combat, so you can keep doing it again and again and again on each turn. Yeah, being able to bounce any number of creatures that saddle it, and you can over-saddle something. Again, it's kind of like crewing something. You can tap, all the creatures that you want to bring back to your hand, so you can then, get them back to your hand to recast them to get whatever ETBs that you're trying to use and abuse. So that does open up the possibility of that. Outside of this and like mount, tribal, or saddle, slash, crew decks out there, yeah, I don't really think this has a place, but like, yeah, it's another interesting way to really use and abuse ETBs because, again, green really is lacking ways to do that. Moving on. Outcaster Trailblazer. This card's going to see a ton of play. A 4/2 Human Druid for 2 and a green. Enters the battlefield at 1 mana of any color. So that's already nice right there. That actually works with Plot, which has Plot for 2 and a green. So being able to plot this away, and then, it's for the same amount, right, essentially as it costs. But then on a future turn, play it for free and gain a mana. That's quite nice to just kind of boost you on that turn. On top of that, whenever another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield control, draw a card. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this, I don't know if it's going to be like Beast Whisperer level essentially of play, but because it is more specific, right? It is creatures power 4 or greater. This is like, what is it, Garrick's Pack Leader? Whichever one, I think it's Garrick's Pack Leader. The one that's like, hey, creatures ETB with power 3 or greater, draw a card. This is 4 or greater, so I think it's a step above that, right? The other one's 3, I'm pretty sure. Still, like, if you're playing a green deck or like a creature-based strategy, typically you've got a lot of powerful creatures. You're going to be getting a lot about it. This also doesn't specify non-token, so keep that in mind. So if you've got, whatever that one landfall one is, that whenever you're going to land a play, you get a 4/4, that kind of thing, you can get a ton of value out of something like this. Like a Goreclaw deck is going to be salivating over this kind of a card, because Goreclaw is all about power 4 or greater, right? And also reduce the cost of this by 2. So it's basically a free spell for you. Again, play it, you get your free mana back, and you plot it, you could do even more. But yes, I guess you can't do it anymore because it's like you're paying that as a cost. Anyways. These kind of like power creature decks, or just decks that have a good amount of creatures in them that would meet their requirement and could draw, you can get a lot of value out of that. Keep in mind also Blink decks might want to consider this as well if they got a decent amount of powerful creatures too. Yeah, this one's going to see a good amount of play. There's also some crazy combos with that I'm sure you can do because, again, entering the battlefield, giving you mana, reduced cost can be pretty crazy. So, yeah, it's a very interesting one. Very interesting, very powerful one. Next up, Prosperity Tycoon, a 4/2 Human Noble forward 3 and a white. Enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap target creature you control gets +1/+0 till turn, active as a sorcery, pay 2, sacrifice a token, it gains indestructible turn, tap it. I think this is more of a limited card. Yeah, the rate of getting 2 creatures for the price of 4 is not all that great. Sure, you can sacrifice things to give it indestructible that costs a decent amount to do so. If that was like a free effect, yeah, sacrifice a token, not paying any mana to do so. Gain indestructible on turn, tap it. It could see play in probably Aristocrat style decks, but since that's not the case, no go for Commander most likely. Next up, Resilient Roadrunner. So we got the other side of the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, essentially, the cartoon. We already saw the Coyote. Haven't seen that episode. Make sure you check that one out. I can't remember which one that is. The second one, I think, is when we saw the Coyote. Anyways, 2/2 bird with haste, protection from coyotes. Haha, hilarious. For 1 and a red, pay 3. It can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with haste. It's a good kind of jokey card, but again, also, we got like the teaser from Morrow about like the Coyote and the Roadrunner, and then someone pointed out like that in the comments, and I was like, oh, I can't wait. I hope they're legendary. They're not legendary, so we are not getting commanders around these. Unfortunately, we're not getting Wile E. Coyote and then the Roadrunner as opposing forces, which I think could have been so fun to do. We still get like as these uncommon creatures, but like other than in limited play, this isn't really going to see play. Next up, Seraphic Steed, a 2/2 unicorn mount that costs 2 mana in Selesnya, first strike, and lifelink. So, low to the ground, first strike, lifelinker. That's pretty good, I'm sure, in limited. On top of that, though, when it attacks while saddled, create a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying, saddle 4. So that is a decently high saddle cost. That being said, again, if you have a deck that utilizes a good amount of power out there, yeah, you can pretty easily saddle that, or a decent amount of creatures, I guess. And then when it attacks while that's happening, you get a 3/3 of flying. So that's pretty nice, being able to build up an army. I don't think you're probably going to utilize this like in an Angel tribal deck. This can give you Angel tokens. Obviously, though, you'd want this to survive combat, which in Commander, maybe you could find a player that isn't willing to block, a 2/2 first striker, isn't able to stop that, essentially. But yeah, I think it's more of a limited card. If you get Unicorn Tribal, there you go. You're probably going to utilize this, though. Or Mount Tribal, Saddle Tribal, whatever you can call it. Next up, Shifting Grift, a sorcery for blue plus. Spree, choose 1 or more additional cost. +2 exchange control to target creatures. +1 exchange control of 2 target artifacts, +1 exchange control of 2 target enchantments. This card would have been perfect for my equivalent exchange Full Metal Alchemist inspired deck. but I kind of took that one apart because players don't like it when you're exchanging things sometimes if you have a whole deck that's built around that. Even though, it's not stealing, I'm switching. I'm swapping. I'm giving you something in return. The thing is, obviously, you're like, and this, unlike some other ones, it doesn't specify like non-token. So if you're like, hey, I'm going to give you my 1/1 servo and I'm going to take your Dragon. Ha. Or I'm going to give you my treasure token and I'm going to take your giant artifact, whatever it is that wanted to come to mind, even just Soul Ring, whatever it is. But yes, this is quite nice because, again, it gives you options, so it's not like you're just stuck to one of these, which is typically why these exchange cards really don't see too much play, because it's like you're just exchanging a 1-for-1 of like, hey, it's got to be a creature. So if there's not 2 great creatures on the board, or 1 great creature plus whatever you have on the board, you're not willing to do that. This gives you options, and like 3 mana to swap artifacts can be very, 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 very good. Same thing with enchantments, and 4 mana for a creature, it's not too bad as well. And having the flexibility and also the option to do more than one of these can be great. Again, if you literally have, again, a tiny enchantment, an artifact token and a creature token, you're like, yeah, I'll pay 6 mana. I was gonna say 5, 6 mana, swap 3 things for like the best 3, 1 creature, 1 artifact, 1 enchantment on the board. Yeah, that can be really, really good. So is this for every deck? Absolutely not. But like, are there decks that should be considering it? Yes, especially obnoxious decks like mine was, that I guess some people don't find obnoxious, but equivalent exchange type decks. Yes. Next up, Shoot the Sheriff. Instant for 1 black, destroy target non-outlaw creature. So here is our standard. I guess it's not like always happening, but like you usually see it come up in standard every now and then. But like the 2 mana, like Doomblade type effect. Destroy target non-outlaw creature. Assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, and warlocks are outlaws. Everything else is fair game. That's hilarious. Everything else is fair game. Oh my gosh. Does it really... is that the first time I'm seeing that? That's amazing. I love that. Everything else is fair game. Yeah. So, I mean, how good is this compared to other ones? I mean, there is that one, I can't remember the name of it, but like you destroy any creature and you lose 2 life. That's more valuable in Commander because the limitation, though it might not seem like that limiting, there's going to be situations where you're like, oh no, like the biggest threat on the board just happens to be one of these creature types. Oh, darn. So, yeah, you really don't want to run into that situation. Can it see play? Absolutely. For, like, removal decks out there, decks that really care about instant speed removal spells that are low to the ground, there's plenty of them out there that, I mean, obviously a lot of decks do, but, like, ones that kind of, like, overuse that effect. Like, I'm thinking about, not Hirobi, but, like, those kind of decks that, like, really want to utilize a lot of over-the-top, just amounts of just target removal. But, yeah. There are going to be times where this does not. I mean, there's going to be times where you figure out, oh, no, that also just happens to be a rogue. Oh, darn. And also, you can't target changelings with this, but still, like, most time, you should be able to target most of the targets out there. So, again, if you're considering this a removal spell, it's probably going to be pretty good in most situations. And then those off situations, you'll be like, oh, no, I can't believe there's a pirate on the board that I really want to get rid of, and I can't. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Next up, Nimble Brigand. A 1/3 human rogue for 3 mana in blue. Can't be blocked if you've committed a crime this turn. Target opponents, anything they control. Cards engraved, it's a crime. Deals counter to a player, draw a card. So this is basically like a new version of, what is it, Shadow Mage Infiltrator, essentially. Yeah, I mean, specific on how it can't be blocked. If you've got a good amount of targeting effects, yeah, it can be quite good. Yeah, if you got a human deck and rogue deck, probably rogue deck more so, you might want to consider this one, especially if you have a decent amount of targeting effects. Which I guess there are rogues that definitely do targeting themselves. Yeah, being able to draw a card on each turn if you can get this through can be quite good. That being said, you need to make sure that you can get this through. There you go. Next up. Okay, so this card, in my opinion, is probably, and again, I don't like to say the term really all the time with it being like a staple, but it's going to be hard to argue against this in certain decks where it's just like, this card is just a bit pushed. Instant for a green plus, so against Spree. +2, mill 4 cards. You may put to 2 creature and/or land cards among the milled cards in your hand. So potential, well, mill help for self-mill deck, or, card selection, not card selection, but card advantage as well for 3 mana, be able to get potentially 2 things. Again, especially if your deck is creature and land heavy, which I guess land heavy, typically you're going to have like 37 or so lands in your deck, right? So you got a decent chance of even just hitting 2 lands off the top of your deck with this. But yeah, being able to have, if you got a decent amount of creatures in your deck, you're probably going to hit at least 2 things that you can get. +4 in a green. You may put it to 2 creature cards from your hand on the battlefield. Okay, so that's basically what Tooth and Nail, without the Entwine, though, essentially, right? So you can't, like, go get out other things. I think Tooth and Nail is 7 mana in itself. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. Is it 7 mana for Tooth and Nail? So, like, that's already undercosted compared to that. I believe. I could be wrong, right? So this would be 6 mana total to do that. But here's the kicker, the big thing right here. +1, creatures you control power 4 or greater gain Hexproof and Indestructible off turn. So Heroic Intervention. Again, Heroic Intervention does not have a requirement of power 4 or greater. In fact, it's all permanents you control. So there is that difference. That being said, if you've got a creature-based strategy, and again, if you've got your commander at the very least, but yeah, creatures that have a decent amount of creatures that have power 4 or greater, or again, if you've got like low-to-ground creatures but you got a bunch of anthems in the deck, you usually can get to that requirement of power 4 or greater, and most of the creatures you want to protect anyways are power 4 or greater. So this is 2 mana to protect your entire board, again, from basically, not everything, but nearly anything, essentially. With that Indestructible Hexproof covers most aspects. Most things. Not everything, but most things it covers. So this is 2 mana to protect your entire board, which is crazy good, and again, has the potential to be like, oh, okay, instant speed, you know, card advantage, but instant speed, cheating things from your hand into play, again, for 6 mana, instant speed, cheating 2 creatures from your hand into play is already absurd. And if you do all these things, okay, what is that mana? What? 1 + 2 is 3, +5 is 8, +1 is 9. Instant speed, 9 mana is a lot. I mean, I think most of the time, though, you're probably going to instant speed. You might not even utilize that first part. You might just say, like, oh, I've already got 2 great creatures in my hand. So, like, instant speed, 7 mana, cheat 2 things into play, and give Indestructible and Hexproof to all your big things, which those 2 things you cheat and play probably are. And I believe, correct me in the comments below, rules lawyers out there, but I've seen it this way, that, like, these things finish in the steps that they are. That does make sense. These things finish in the order that they're listed. So again, if you pay for, let's say, all these, first you're going to mill the 4 cards, then get 2 things into your hand. Then you're going to put the 2 creature cards in your hand on the battlefield. Then you're going to give everything Indestructible. So those things that you cheat into play will get the Hexproof and Indestructible, if they have power 4 greater. So again, out of nowhere, cheating things into play, giving your entire team Hexproof Indestructible is just a massive game-changing play, where again, someone's like, haha, I wrath the board, and you're like, cool. Wrath of God, thank you for casting that. You just gave me a one-sided board wipe because my team is saved. Oh, and by the way, I'm cheating into play these 2 creatures that I just got off the top of my deck. Essentially, I milled in my graveyard. Thank you. So, yeah, this is a massive, massive card, I think. And again, is it more limited than like Heroic Intervention? Absolutely. Heroic Intervention can basically go in any green deck out there, pretty much. Because, again, it's protecting every single kind of permanent. It is limited to budget, obviously, what I say, too. And, again, not everything's a staple. Not everything should go in every deck. Again, Cyclonic Rift, there are decks that should not use Cyclonic Rift, okay? There really are. But this is a very, 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 very pushed card. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Next up, Terror of the Peaks. This is a reprint, I believe. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. It's a nice mythic. I don't think it's going to be budget-friendly ever. 5/4 Dragon with Flying for 5 mana. Spells your opponent's cast the target. It costs additional 3 life to cast. Ouch. Basically ward 3 life, essentially. Whatever creature in his battlefield under control deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. Ouch. Yeah, that's just very, very, very good. Basically Warstorm Surge, kind of, essentially. But Terror of the Peaks actually doing the damage, so there's some crazy things you can do with that with, like, lifelink or, like, Infect if you can give that to it. So it's a very good card. Yeah. Anyways, moving on. Another round. Thank you, MTG Goldfish, for the translated version of this one. Sorcery for X, X2, and a white. Exile a number of creatures you control. They return those creatures to the battlefield under those control. Repeat this process X times. Okay. So this one, at the very least, is, again, this is sorcery speed, so that does limit this quite a bit. Again, typically with these, you'd be like, okay, I'd like it to be instant speed so I can utilize it to kind of blank removal. But like the process of this one more so is, or the function of this one more so is, do you have a blink deck where you have a bunch of creatures with a bunch of ETBs? Great. Okay, at the very least, this is 3 mana. Blink all your creatures once, which you're going to get that value back, and then some most likely from the creatures that you're blinking, and you are getting value out of. Think of like a Brago deck. Now, if you've got a good amount of mana, cool. If you put 2 more mana in this, so at 5 mana, you blink into creatures twice. There's that one, I can't remember, someone's Acrobatics, whatever, from the D&D set a while back, where it's like Lazelle's Acrobatics, where you like roll a dice, and if you hit it right, you get to do twice. But this one's like, oh, okay, if you have extra mana, basically paying 2 extra mana, you do it more times. So being able to get all your ETBs again and again and again and again and again is just an absurd card. So yeah, Blink decks will probably love this kind of a card. Again, not like that it's not flexible, you know, for instant speed, but still, I'm sure there's Blink decks that can justify this kind of value. Next up, and here is the translated version on Reddit, so my apologies if this is incorrect. Raider's Loot, it's an artifact that obviously costs 3. Whatever can commit a crime, put a loot counter on it, so it triggers only once each turn. Tap, add 1 of any color. Pay 2, tap, remove a loot counter from it. Move 2 loot counters from it, sorry, draw a card. So this is, again, Wizards is starting to get better and better and better about making more utility, essentially mana rocks at 3. Try not to focus so much on mana rocks that cost 2. They're giving us some more that cost 2 that tap for 1 still, but this one is interesting. I mean, because it can give you some card advantage throughout the game. You do have to build that up on loot counters, so you got to make sure that you're in a deck that has a good amount of targeting effects, again, to commit those crimes, get counters on this. Paying 2 to still tap and remove this still is, I mean, technically like 3 mana in total, right? Because you are tapping a mana source with this to do so. Is it for every deck? Absolutely not. If you've got a good amount of, ways to target things or like proliferate effects as well, yeah, you could consider it. But typically when it comes to ramp, I'm mostly just going to be considering ones that are more efficient, costing 2 tapping for 1 for the most part. There are other occasions where like Midnight Clock can be very good. Yeah, it's interesting though. Finally though, and this is the one I'm going to talk about in a little more depth with the budget buys and pricier picks, Bristly Bill Spine Sower. Okay, here we go. 2/2 plant druid for 1 and a green. Landfall whenever land is battlefield under control, put a counter on target creature. +1 counter. Pay 3 green. Double the number of +1 counters on each creature you control. Gross. So, okay. We've got a repeatable counter doubling effect, and yeah, that can pretty easily go infinite with a couple of things out there. Yeah, that's very powerful. So that first part, just being able to get initial counters on things, so that landfall is nice. Is it overpowered? No. But yeah, being able to get initial counters on things is quite nice. But yeah, being able to double the number of counters in each creature you control is absurd. You're in green, obviously. You've got plenty of ways to ramp, plenty of ways to use and abuse this, so you can activate it once, maybe even twice, or again, potentially an infinite number of times, and rules lawyers out there. Technically, nothing is infinite. Trillion times than whatever it is, okay? You got ways to win with this just by doubling up the number of counters on each creature you control even a couple of times. This is a pretty crazy effect. You are limited to mono green. Thank goodness this is limited. This is the kind of card, though, that some might just be like, oh, yeah, counters. Like, yeah, you're doing fun things, getting creatures larger. Great, good for you. Other ones that were like, oh, okay, there's, we'll get to the actual cards, but there's this card. Oh, okay, that's infinite. Yep, you win. Congratulations. So, yeah, there's some crazy things you do to this one. Let's jump into some cards that work well with it, budget buys and price your picks. All these cards are going to be in a card list link in the description below in case you're interested in this commander, and yeah, I can see this commander being quite popular. First up with the budget buys, and this one used to not be very budget, now is very budget and combos with a lot of things. That being said, does combo with this as well potentially if you're set up properly. Devoted Druid, a 0/2 elf druid for 1 and a green, tap for a green, put a -1/-1 counter on it, untap it. So this has repeatability in that you can keep putting -1/-1 counters on it as long as it's large enough, essentially. So the thing with this one in this combination would be you need enough counters on it so that you can basically untap this 5 times to get the mana to put more counters on it and everything else so that you can do it again and again and again and again. And obviously, if you have enough counters on it, you would be able to, basically make infinite mana and also get infinite counters on all your things. So, yeah, how many do you actually need on it? I guess would be, 10 to start, I think? 10 counters on it? Because you would need to, I guess if you have 5 counters on it to start, and then you tap to add, with your other mana sources, including this too, I guess. And then you activate your commander's ability, double the number of counters on it, which put it to 10. You untap it 5 times, giving it 5 more mana to put back into it. Then you could double that back again to 10 to untap it 5 times. So that would, I guess, be the threshold that you would need it to be at. That being said, if you're at more than that, obviously, that is infinite mana, infinite shenanigans. You got plenty of ways to win with infinite mana and infinite activations of your commander. So, yeah, have fun with that. So that's just one of the ways to combo. It does require some setup, though, and some other things we'll talk about a little later don't require all that much setup. Next up, any kind of a creature that taps and says, like, hey, based on my amount of power or whatnot, I'm giving you mana, is incredible with this. Enters the battlefield, whenever a human enters the battlefield under control, put a +1 counter on Hero and Blade Elite. Tap at X mana of any one color, X is Hero and Blade Elite's power. So, yeah, if you got a decent amount of humans in the deck, cool. Not really all that necessary, though, because, again, all you need to do is just start getting counters on this, double up the counters with it, with their commander, and all of a sudden, this is tapping for 10+ mana quite easily. And then when that happens again, obviously, you can just activate your commander again and again, and then double it again and again. Literally, if you're at, let's say, again, 10 power on this, you tap it for 10 power, you activate your commander twice, it's at, 9 counters, going to 18, going to 36, just absolutely absurd amounts of mana can be had with this. And again, your commander's ability, I don't believe it was limited to sorcery speed, so have fun with that. Next up, Viridian Joiner. Again, yeah, tap an amount of green equal to its power. This one doesn't just grow over time, you know, if humans go into play or whatnot, but that really doesn't matter all that much. Get counters on that, and again, your commander is one way to do that. You probably have other ways in the deck too, obviously. But yeah, get counters on it. Double up those counters, do some crazy things. Cradle Clear Cutter. This one can start off at either as a 1/3 or a 3/6, depending on if you prototype it or not. Tap to add green equal to its power. There's a decent amount of these effects out there. Make sure you're utilizing them with a commander like this. This one actually is interesting because it doesn't care about its own power. Big Horner Rancher, a 2/5 Vigilant Human Rancher. Or Ranger, sorry. The tapped add amount of green equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So this one, I guess, can care about its own power or something else's power. And yeah, tap for a good amount of mana. You can also sacrifice it to gain life equal to the greatest toughness among other creatures you control. Sure, I guess that matters too. If you want to pad your life total to oblivion, you really can, I guess. If you have, again, that infinite combination where you're like, hey, this thing's infinitely large, then you're like, oh, okay, cool. A trillion, whatever rules there's out there. Okay, I gained a trillion life. Good luck taking me out opponents at all. Next up. This one actually works very well with the commander. It's not infinite, but it's very good. 0/0 Cryptolith Trilobite. There we go. For XX. Enters battlefield, X counters on it. Remove a counter from it. Add colors. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. So normally this wouldn't really see play in a good amount of decks out there that like want to use and abuse things because like, oh, well, I can generate a lot of mana with it, but I can't utilize that mana. This is actually really good again with this commander because your commander has an activated ability that you really want to use and abuse. So basically, every counter you get on this equals 2 mana toward the 3 generic mana of your commander's ability. And again, let's say you're activating your commander or want to activate your commander twice in a turn. You remove 3 counters from this. That's 6 colorless mana for you to dump in your commander's ability. Then you just need, what, 4 green essentially to activate that twice? So yeah, this can do some crazy good things. Can obviously combo in combination with some other things as well. Makes it easier to combo with like a Devoted Druid, so keep that in mind. You can also pay 1 to tap and put a counter on this to kind of get things started with it too. Next up, Fertilid. Yeah, enters battlefield, 2 counters on it. Pay 1 green, move a counter from it. Target player search life for a base life card, puts the card battlefield tap, then shuffles. This one does not go infinite, but has a very interesting synergy with this because, hey, you pay 1 green. Cool, I go Rampant Growth. I get it land into play. Oh, my commander says, hey, you got to land into play. Put a counter on something. You're like, counter on Fertilid. Pay 1 green again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Yeah, basically repeatable rampant growth. And also, sure, if you don't really want to get that counter back on this, just like double up your counters, and then you got enough on this, and then you can just keep utilizing it again and again and again. Next up, Spike Feeder. This one is utilized in a different way. Move a counter from it, gain 2 life. You can also move counters from it to put counters on other creatures if you really want to do that too. But yes, this one again is basically once you're at that point where you're like, hey, a stupid amount of counters on this. Like you have like 40 counters on this. You're like, okay, cool. I guess my opponent's coming at me with a lot of creatures. I guess I'll gain like 20 life. Sure, why not? Cool. Or again, if you have a trillion counters on it, congratulations. That's 2 trillion life. Yeah, pad your life total to oblivion. Etched Oracle. My goodness, this is spicy. A 0/0 Sunburst, which is hilarious in a green deck because you're just like, mono green. Yeah. It's 1 counter. I guess if you've got things that can tap for other kind of colors, though, which you probably do, then yeah, you can get more counters on this to start. That being said, even if you don't, you got other ways to put counters on it. You got ways to double, obviously. By paying a single mana, remove 4 counters from it. Target player draws 3 cards. Yeah, that's spicy because you're going to be targeting yourself, obviously, but get a lot of counters on this. All of a sudden, just pay like 1 mana, remove 4 counters because that's going to be nothing to you at a certain point. Have yourself draw 3 cards. This is repeatable, like Ancestral Recall for you, essentially, once you are set up properly. So that is quite spicy. Speaking of spicy, Mindless Automaton, even easier potentially. And just with 2 counters on it, you can pay a 1 and, discard a card to get a counter on this if you really want to. I guess that can help kind of get yourself set up to get enough counters on it so that doubling it's really, really effective. Still, removing 2 counters from it, draw a card. Yes, please. Absurd draw engine with this kind of a commander where you're like, oh, okay, cool. I've got 10 counters on this. I'll pay 5. I'll double my counters. Okay, cool. It's at 20. I'd like to draw 5 cards, please. I'll remove 10 counters from this. Draw 5 cards. You're good to go. So you can do some crazy things with this. Obviously, if you're going infinite with like Devoted Druid, this also just makes it so you can just draw your entire deck if you want and then utilize your infinite mana to win. Or you just utilize your infinite mana to win by getting infinite counters on this. Again, a trillion rules letters out there. I know I annoy some people when I say infinite, but come on, it's basically infinite, right? 1/1 construct for 6 mana. Enters battle with 3 counters on it. Move a counter from it, 1 damage to any target. Yeah, if you get enough counters on this, you can just remove all those counters to deal damage to your opponents, to take them all out. Or all their creatures, or all their planeswalkers, whatever you want to do, take them all out. Forgotten Ancient. an amazing card with this commander. Whenever a player casts a spell, you get a counter on this. If you gain your upkeep, may move any number of counters from it on other creatures. Again, you're playing Commander. This card's super good in Commander because everyone's casting spells, right? And you got more opponents, so everyone's going to be casting more spells. You get more counters on this. Again, very easily. Just with one trooper on the table, you get like 10 counters on this. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. I'll pay 5 with my Commander. Double that, and then move those counters out. Cool. Yeah, this can be very, 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 very effective, especially, again, when you are, like, trying to set yourself up to get that combo going with, like, Devoted Druid. You're like, oh, I'll just get all these counters on this, and then double that up, then move it over, and then I'm good to go. Loyal Guardian, there's plenty of other ways to essentially get counters on your creatures. This is a very good one. Beginning of combat, your turn, if you control your commander, get a counter each creature control. Just getting started off with that first counter again can be very important. So you're like, okay, cool. I got that first counter on my creatures. My commander can then start doubling them on every single one of my creatures. Also, you might just want to consider cards that just give you free mana, like Frontier Siege. Like, it's kind of like a mana vault for you. We're just like, oh, not mana vault, but it's a card that just generates mana perpetually throughout the game for you. Champion for 4 mana, enters battlefield. You're going to choose cons. You're going to have each of your main phases add green in your mana pool. Again, each of your main phases, so you get 4 mana for free on your turn. That means, again, with your commander's ability, it's like, oh, I just paid for the green of it. Okay, I just need 3 generic mana on each of my main phases to utilize that twice, which, again, can be absolutely absurd. So yeah, cards like this can be great. Now, when it comes to price your picks, again, cards that are above my budget but might be within yours, again, all these cards are in the card list link in the description below if you're interested in any of them. The one that Eddie actually brought up first, yeah, Crystalline Crawler. Very, very easy to go infinite with this commander. A 1/1 construct for 4 mana, enters the battlefield with a counter on it for each mana spent to cast it. Again, kind of funny in a monocolor deck because you're like, I usually wouldn't see a Converge card in a monocolor deck, but hey, it works. Regardless, even if you only start off with 1 counter, that's fine because you got other ways to add counters, including in your commander's landfall trigger, but also other things too. Move a counter from it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Tap, put a counter on it. Very easy, very apparent to see how you go infinite with this. Again, kind of like Devoted Druid, have enough counters on it, and essentially you just say, oh, okay, cool. Activate my commander's ability to double up my counters. Do it again, and again, and again, and again. Infinite mana, essentially of all colors. Have fun with that. Next up, Walking Ballista, a 0/0 construct for XX. Basically a more expensive Triskelion. I mean, better, sure, but also, yeah, does the exact same function for the deck. Enters battlefield, X counters on it, pay 4, put a counter on it, remove a counter from it, 1 damage any target. So yeah, get counters on this, remove those counters, take out your punts. Also, things that actually cost mana to remove those counters to get abilities from can be very effective, like a Steelbane Hydra. 0/0 enters the battlefield, X counters on it, so you get a lot into this to start. Again, you are in green, you get plenty of ways to ramp. Pay 2 in a green, remove a counter from it, destroy a target artifact or enchantment. So, repeatably getting rid of things, it's kind of like, what's a comma, essentially, that ability? So yeah, just repeatedly getting rid of artifacts and enchantments that can be incredibly effective for you. On top of this, just being a massive threat for you at a certain point. Spike Weaver, interesting as well. A 0/0 enters the battlefield with 3 counters on it. Again, it has that spike thing where it's like, hey, remove a counter from this, put on something else. Or, pay 1, remove a counter from it. Creatures deal no combat damage this turn. You know what's more annoying than Spore Frog? This, in this kind of a deck. Because again, you basically can get in enough counters on it where you can just keep like doubling it up and being like, okay, I fog again. Okay, your turn. Okay, I fog again on your turn. Okay, third opponent's turn. Okay, I fog again on your turn. Okay, none of you are attacking me ever until you get rid of this. Lovely. Lovely for me. Anyways, Workhorse, another one to consider as well. 0/0 enters battlefield, 4 counters on it. Move a counter from it, add a colorless mana to your mana pool. Play as a mana source. It's been reworded. Basically, just remove a counter from it, add a colorless. Again, this will not help you go infinite with your commander unless you've got a way to like Chromatic Orrery, kind of like you can use mana of any color or whatever it is. Yeah, or like Gemstone Array, I guess, could help with that too, but you're not going to go infinite with this, most likely, but you are just going to make up for that 3 generic mana every single time for your commander's ability, so you can just really, really heavily utilize, again, the ability again and again and again. Next up, Gyre Sage Evolve, so this can get bigger if more creatures come into play. Regardless, 1/2, tap, add green for each counter on it. Yeah, again, this deck is all about getting counters on things and tapping for a massive amount of mana. Have fun with that. Marwyn the Nurturer. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield under control, get a counter on this. Tap down amount of power, or green equal to its power. So again, get a lot of counters on this. Tap for an absurd amount of mana. Get even more counters on your things. Yeah, all these like tap for their power are pretty absurd with this commander. Next up, Hardened Scales. If one or more counters are put on a creature you control, that many +1 counters are put on instead. Essentially, doubling it up for just a single mana, again, without landfall, is very nice. And again, when you are doubling, you're adding an extra one on top of that to really kind of skyrocket yourself. So it's very, very, very effective, obviously, but Not nearly as effective as Branching Evolution. Enchantment for 3 mana. If one or more counters will be put on a creature you control, twice that many of those counters are put on instead. Absurd with this commander. My goodness. Again, literally just, hey, okay, I've got, let's say, 5 counters on all my creatures. I pay that 5 mana to double that. Okay, instead of putting that 5, I'm putting an extra 10 on all those creatures, putting the 15. If I do that again, instead of putting, well, I mean, at this point, you know, it's just absurd amounts, right? 15 to 30. It really skyrockets things quite quickly. Next up, Kami of Whispered Hopes. If one of our counters put on a creature permanent you control, that many +1 again, so just keep that in mind. Again, this is another way to say, hey, extra counters like Hardened Scales, but on top of that, tap, add X mana if anyone color exits its power. This does both for you. Again, this basically gives you extra counters and also can tap for an absurd amount of mana to give you even more counters from your commander. Cloning Hydra. Kind of like the one I always think about with this, where it's like the OG way to double up counters. Enters the battlefield with 4 counters on it. When it attacks, double the number of counters on each creature you control. Yeah, this is quite good because it's like a, not free, again, because like you have to actually attack to get that, but it's basically a free way every single one of your turns to double up your counters, which then just makes your commander even more effective with that ability to execute with the actual activated ability. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to hear from you. So in the comments below, actually, I just remembered that I forgot to talk about one card. Doubling Season. Any of those ways that double up the amount of counters. There you go. Doubling Season. I may try mention it. So please don't just yell in the comments below. You forgot to mention Doubling Season. It's good with a lot of commanders, okay? I know. All right? I know. Regardless, comment below your thoughts on all of these. If you are interested in Bristly Bill's Spinesore, I think now do we have 2 bills? 3 bills? Do we have 3 bills in Magic now? Let me know in the comments below on that. I think we got like that one bill that's like steals things. We have the one bill that's a horse, and now this bill, I think, right? Essentially. Anyways, if you're interested in this commander, make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. Stay tuned for more exciting spoilers and quick takes coming up. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.